Welcome to another insightful episode of Me and My Health Up. I'm your host, Anthony Harcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And to do that today, we have two special guests. Yes, a double show again. We have with us Raul Haro, who's doing an internship with Me and My Wellness. How are you today, Raul?
I'm doing great, Anthony. Once again, thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. And Raul's studying health administration at university. And our special guest is Doug Carlton from the US as well. How are you today, Doug?
Doing great, Anthony. Raul, good to see you guys.
And we've asked Doug to come on the show because he's the owner of Harvest Oasis, which is a company that gets organic produce, turns it into meals, chemical-free, GMO-free, from local farmers and gets it to the local community, which is making it at the most highest nutritional level it can possibly be. And we're going to discuss today the importance of the connection with nature. And we're going to get down to that microbe level. So yes, we'll be talking about gut health again and why gut health is important and what you can do to maintain good gut health. So, so excited to have you on, Doug. Please share a little bit more about your background and how you have arrived at what you're doing today.
Well, I've always been interested in health and wellness, but never was really very well informed about what that entails. And a couple years ago, I had a real health emergency emerge of one of my family members. And that really ignited me in a search for answers. So trying to help a loved one is a great motivator. And in this particular case, my loved one was suffering with about 12 different symptoms. And in my quest for answers, I really got immersed in the science and the experts that are leading the food as medicine movement. And these are integrative physicians, functional medicine physicians, and lifestyle practitioners. So in the process of learning this information, I decided that, well, I personally needed to walk that journey. And I got very involved with Ketogenic Diet initially, all clean, vegetarian-based meals. And that really got me a firsthand experience at how important that is for really resetting our metabolism, for reaching our optimum weight. And I experienced those benefits right off. And that's what's kind of propelled me into this arena.
Yeah, so you saw the benefits of food as medicine from a first-hand experience in terms of your health journey. And by cleaning up your diet, it's really improved your health and well-being. And it's sort of set you on this journey to further look into the science behind food as medicine and how important it is for us. My next question, Doug, is around this connection with nature, because we've had pre-recording discussions around this, and you're such a passionate advocate for this whole theme around connection. So please share with us this view around connection and the importance of connection with nature.
Right. Well, one of the things that's kind of inspired me about your mission is this front and center importance of wellness. And for me, that's a unifier. That's a unifying subject. And as human beings, I think almost without exception, everyone is pro-wellness. So in our highly polarized world, we're disconnected at so many levels, specifically with our own physiology. Human beings are not aware of the fact that the majority of the cells that make up a human body are non-human. So the majority of the cells that really create the wellness of a human being are microbial, and that's fascinating. And this is new knowledge, and we've really become aware of it starting in maybe 2008-ish time frame. So the microbiome is this incredibly diverse trillions of organisms that actually we now know are on every surface in every organ of our bodies. Now, the largest concentration are in our intestinal tract, and we have from 3 to 5 pounds of microbes just in our large intestinal system. So I look at these guys as our micromates, and I really like to think of it as we're captains of a vessel, and what we put down the hatch is hugely impactful to the mates, the trillions, and to us, because they truly are our source of health. So I've become a champion for the microbes. This is my mission now with Harvest Oasis, is that this is the life that's all around us. These are the underappreciated sources of our wellness. And, well, quite frankly, we're trashing them. Human beings are having such an impact on the fabric of life, which these microbes make up. And we can go into that a little bit, but certainly it's very prevalent in our medical model, because a lot of the treatments like antibiotics that we're presented with so frequently are actually harming our microbiomes significantly. And we're really not aware of that, and our healthcare practitioners are not really aware of that, and it's not any part of informed consent when we're prescribed some of these medications. But when we get the concept that we have, a teeming rainforest of diversity within our intestinal system, then we really want to become a lot more thoughtful about what we're taking in. And so connection with our own physiology is primary. And then when we have that connection and we have the support of our micromates, then we're actually going to get more support from nature herself. Because now that we've allied with nature and we're getting a consciousness of the life around us and a compassion for it, that's connecting us. That's connecting us with nature. And there's no more powerful team to be on than nature's team. I mean, human beings, we have a lot of hubris. We lack humility often with our behaviors. We have not enough respect for what we don't know. And if we're going to compete with nature, it's not going to end well. Nature is always going to win. Nature's been here long before humans and will be here long after humans. So this connection with nature and with all the life that nature supports is foundational. And then it becomes the foundation for our connection with one another. And that's what we so desperately need right now. For me, because wellness is so universal as a value, it becomes a rallying cry for humans to turn the tide of the polarization, the divisiveness, the pettiness of trying to focus on differences when we're way more alike than we are different. So that's kind of my general answer to connection, that it's so important at so many levels, and it's so fulfilling as that becomes a centerpiece of your life. You just become joy-based, really, because in everybody's eyes, what you see is a fantastic human being. What you experience is love. And there's nothing better than that. You know, those little moments of connection are just inspiring.
100%, Doug. Totally resonate with what you're saying around this connection and this dependence that we have on nature for our survival. And it's very clear in terms of trees produce oxygen. For them to produce oxygen, they need to take in carbon dioxide. We produce carbon dioxide. So we have this symbiotic relationship with the basic, getting that air, which is vital for human life. It's the same with water. We've got a reliance on water and sun that we can't live without. So absolutely, there's no human existence without nature, and we need to work with it and not against it. There was a point that you raised around hygiene, and the microbes obviously don't respond well to highly, hygienic practices. Essentially, it just wipes them out, which, you can understand from a sanitization point of view. And in some places, you really need that really high grade sanitization, such as hospitals. But we've taken it beyond hospitals, and we have this very sanitized society. And even more so over the last couple of years, this has been brought to the forefront, and we're just constantly washing our hands or putting alcohol rub on our hands. And that's obviously creating a higher level of sanitization and reduces the risk of certainly getting, these viruses. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but we often take these practices to the extreme. And, over the course of the decade, so looking beyond the last 2 years, it's obvious why we've done it. But look at the previous decades, we have become very and extremely sanitized, and it's really affected the microbes or the gut health of the younger generation growing up. There's more rising cases of eczema and asthma and all sorts of skin disorders. So what are your thoughts around our hygiene practices and this excessive sanitization that we're seeing?
Right. Yeah, I think it needs to be revisited. It's over the top, and it is indiscriminate, and there are many man-made chemicals employed to get specific cleaning results, and these chemicals are not. They have no real concern for their impact on the microbes. Is it going to be a bleach that just kills everything, 99.9% of the time? So in the medical literature, it's called the sanitation hypothesis, I believe. And it's basically exactly what you have just communicated, that, hey, we're overdoing it. We are causing unintended consequences. And specifically what's happening is that in our industrial society, the diversity of our microbes is being harmed. It's being greatly reduced. And microbiome scientists, I like the Sonnenbergs from Stanford University. It's a husband and wife team, and they're microbiome scientists, and they run a lab out there that's associated with the Stanford Medical Complex. And the Sonnenbergs have coined the term an industrial microbiome. And they basically say it's very different from indigenous people, that there are some indigenous people that still have fairly protected lifestyles, that they're not contaminated by the extent of this hygiene, that hygiene practices, for example, or even chemically grown foods. So these folks have been studied, and their microbiomes are very similar across the world, and whatever continent that you get these very, very native populations. And their diversity is quite a bit greater than industrialized people like us. So the over sanitation, but also the agricultural practices where we're using more and more chemical to control the farm environment to get the yields that the farmers need in order to make it economically viable to be a farmer. Those products are harming our microbes. they're skewing our population of microbes in an unhealthy ratio. And so our rates of illness, like you are mentioning, which, by the way, are very alarming. One statistic I think that I feel really draws attention to it is that in the 1960s in the States, something around 2% of our children, say 17 and under, had some diagnosis of a chronic illness. And you know what that number is today? It's about 50% of our children have at least one diagnosis of a chronic illness. Now, that should be waking everybody up. That's not okay, right? We are not well as a species, and we have to stand up and say, okay, why? Sanitation, agriculture chemicals, what is it? Or all of it. And we need to say it's time to get connected and take all this life into account. If it lives, it matters. If it lives, it matters. And we want to protect it because it all has a place in this web of life. And we've got to stop thinking that as humans, we're not part of nature, right? That's crazy talk. But yet that's the definition in Webster's dictionary of nature. It's all these things that are not man or that are not made by man. That's nature over there, and we're over here. And that's not okay as a concept, because then we can perpetrate on the other, and that's getting us more enmeshed in the mess that we're in.
So how can listeners reconnect with nature? What are some of your simple tips, and how can they avoid some of these nasty chemicals? What should they do around their diet and lifestyle?
Well, Harvest Oasis, the actual name, a friend of mine came up with it. I thought it was pretty clever, actually. And I actually have a second business that's really my core business, which is in transportation. I run a moving and storage company, and we offer worldwide service. We've moved people to every continent except Antarctica. Do a lot of cross-country moving in the States. And anyway, we actually are physically located on Harvest Road in this town that we live in, Durham, North Carolina. Harvest Oasis, though, is about creating an oasis. And so what I like to think of is that your home, your body, you have the ability to really improve those environments. We really like a line of non-toxic cleaners that we use in our office and in our homes. Very important to have an air purifier that's going to clean the air where you live and work. Very important to have clean water, whether you're getting it from a tested source of spring water, bottled water delivered, or whether you've got a state-of-the-art reverse osmosis system that adds minerals back in to the pure water. And then the food. The food is really fundamental. And it's difficult to get clean food. In our system in the States, and probably where you are in Australia, there are somewhere around 10,000 man-made additives that are in our food chain. And something like 70% of all food products in the market, the grocery store, have some added sugar, added sweeteners. So this is a highly processed, really adulterated industrial food system that we're in. And we have to step out of that. And there's a lot of movement afoot. We're not inventing anything new. And the information that I try to present and synthesize, I've learned it all from experts. I'm not a doctor. So, but what I am is a father, and I am a business leader, and I have a lot of people that I love and I care for. And too many reports are coming in of family members being sick, children being sick. and I am passionate about stopping that to the extent that we can. It's a kind of interesting aside. Some of our top, most successful business people are thinking that that they want to go fly to Mars, right? So we've got Elon Musk, and his mission is to go get out of here because this place is he's more or less written us off, and we're not going to get invited to go with him. So we really want to be part of the what I call the stay and play movement, right? We want to stay here, fix it, and bring some joy back to everybody we love. So that's what we're about at Harvest Oasis. So you make that oasis really in your own home and in your own workplace, and then you really want it in your community, right? That's kind of the next step is how do we come together locally and say, hey, don't spray those poisons in the schoolyard. Don't spray those poisons in the parks and all along the side of our roads, right? That's hard. That's not good for our communities. It's not good for the health of the kids that play on the school field or the golf course, for that matter, whatever it is. So these herbicides are really antibiotics. They really get into our systems, and they sterilize us and the microbes. And that's going to show up in all these different ways, like the asthma and the eczema, the ADD and the depression, the anxiety, many different disorders. Almost all go back to this inflammation that we have, and we're kind of setting the world on fire, really, from the standpoint of a macro impact that human beings are having. We're causing inflammation in natural systems. We're causing inflammation in our own systems. And then that's going to show up with all the quarreling that we see and all the disagreement. So to get back to the question, it's really about small steps, principle-based, where we're promoting the health of our micromates, that we've got to get this awareness that life is all around us and we want to support it. And through supporting that, we support the things we love, including our own wellness.
Excellent. Raul, I'd like to bring you in on this conversation. So what are your thoughts thus far in terms of what Doug's had to say, and have you got any questions?
No, I mean, it's all very interesting. You think of all these chemicals and additives that we have in our society, from agriculture to schools and just around the neighborhood, like Doug was saying. It made me think of GMOs. I've heard GMOs like all the time. And one thing that I've heard also is that GMOs were essential for helping a growing population. So what do you have to say to that, Doug?
Well, I think that's a great point. GMOs are a super important topic. We first heard about them probably in the 1960s or so, and maybe the 50s with the Green Revolution. I mean, at least what we've heard there was the miracle of fertilizers and so forth, and that was pre-GMO. The GMOs really came on the scene in the 1990s. I think the first crop that was GMO was possibly a squash, but it quickly went to corn and other things. And clearly it was touted to be needed so that like the farmers in the States could feed the world, or the farmers in Australia could feed, Asia or neighbors on your part of the world. And that's fine. I mean, that was what it was sold to us as. The reality is something quite different. It's a really difficult thing to do, to try to control nature. And GMO is fundamentally about human beings man doing something better than nature can. And so how that began was, these crops that were propping up with all this fertilizer and stuff, they look good, they're green, and that's what some of these chemicals do, but they're not actually as resilient as natural crops were normally. So now we have a new problem. We're seeing that the plant roots are not really as resilient to weeds as they normally are, so we're going to need to add a chemical to deal with the weeds. They're not as resistant to pests as they normally are, so we need to add some chemical to deal with pests. Now, let's be real clever and let's engineer the plants so that they can withstand the chemicals that we need to apply to get rid of the weeds and the pests. And that's where GMO came in. So now we've got a plant that's designed with genetic therapy to be able to withstand Roundup and glyphosate. Glyphosate was one of the big toxic chemicals that we wanted to be able to use to kill weeds because it was pretty good at it. So the plants were engineered so that they could withstand the chemical, the glyphosate, and then the glyphosate was very effective at getting rid of the other plants. And that worked for a few seasons, and then the effectiveness waned, and some of that genetic resistance that we put in the corn, it got transferred over to the weeds. So now the weeds become Roundup resistant. So we add a new chemical and we genetically modify the corn so now it can withstand 2 chemical poisons. Well, today we actually are up to 4 chemical poisons, and the seeds that are being sold to the farmers have been engineered to withstand all 4, and we've had to do that because of the diminishing returns of the effectiveness of any one chemical by itself. So this whole promise of GMO is also not worked out in terms of yields. The actual yield of these farms has been going down as these diminishing returns have set in. And it shouldn't really be a surprise because we see that law of diminishing returns with almost all of the chemical treatments that we have. Even with the medications that are given to people for their chronic illness, they often have to be increased because the effectiveness wanes, or they have to go to a different one or whatever. So GMO's promise of feeding the world is a false promise. It's never turned out to be true. And in fact, it with so many clever ideas that man comes up with, the unintended consequences they outweigh any benefits. And that's what I believe has happened with GMO.
Yeah, you raised a really good point in terms of the adaptation of nature and how it evolves and, for its own survival. And yeah, it's the same as the virus, I guess, in terms of the pandemic at the moment. It's constantly evolving to get away from the vaccine, and nature's intelligent like that. And there was a book I was just recently reading. I've started reading. It's called the Hidden Life of Trees, and it talks about how trees communicate amongst one another. And essentially what they've worked out is it's the roots and the fungi and the bacteria within the soil that allows that communication to happen between trees. And what one tree can do is divert nutrients from it and give it to another tree via this connection through the root system, through the fungi, through the bacteria. And these trees as a collective can really look after one another so that they can survive and thrive by essentially diverting nutrients to the ones that need it, that haven't got the nutrients that they need to survive. And the other amazing thing that came out in the book was when giraffes eat a particular tree, the tree sends a signal to the other trees that are connected with that tree, and for them to release a chemical that the giraffes will stop eating the leaves. And this sort of thing is just phenomenal. And it really opens my mind to the intelligence of nature and to your earlier point of how we have to work with it in order and have this symbiotic relationship where we're looking after it, it's serving us, and we serve it, and we live in harmony, as opposed to trying to, as you said, do GMO, genetically modified crops, or pesticides. And nature itself has mechanisms which it can withstand pests. It's the same as what I was also in that book was it was alluding to. It's the same as when a bug comes and eats the leaves. It will then do something to withstand that bug, and that's just natural evolution. We don't need to come and intervene or interfere, and this is the problem. We always think that we know better and that we can make things better by just taking this approach. And we've obviously seen that over the decades, over the centuries, that it hasn't worked out. It's the same as removing the wolves from Yellowstone Valley in the States. We saw what detrimental impact that had to the rivers and to the diversity of nature once the wolves were removed, and when they returned, how much difference that made. And so, we're constantly seeing this all over the place.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the difficulty we have, I think, is there's no monetary gain for any business entity when the wolves return, right? There's no monetary gain. It's clearly a very important development, and it's wonderful to see nature heal, and for humans to thrive, we have to live in a healthy world. So we can understand how important it is, but there's no economic driver for it. It's not monetized, and therein lies the rub. Is that we have developed an economic system that has only one measure of value, and that measure of value is bottom line money, and that's an out of balance system. It's like a stool with one leg, right? It's not going to work. So at some level, we really have to connect with values that are just as important, and somehow collectively choose to put them on an equal footing with being profitable, right? Being profitable is important if you want to run a venture, but life is more important. So I would say that there are things that are more important really than money, but that isn't prevalent, and it's not what's running the show right now. We have an international economic system that really overpowers any political system, and so we're kind of in a crisis mode with macro drivers that are working against the welfare of people and the well-being of our species and the welfare really of our planet. And so, being solutions oriented, we really have to, I think, address that in some way, many ways, probably.
And so, in terms of what the listeners can do, in terms of showing support for this, connection with nature and helping their gut health, you would recommend them buying organic produce. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we want to think local. And we want to think small steps. In each of our communities, there are people that want to provide that clean food. There are people that want to have organic farming, but organic is an interesting label. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have healthy soil to be organic. To be organic, you simply have to avoid things. So you can't use this, you can't use that, you can't use something else. And some of the organic operations have relatively unhealthy soil and still are producing organic product. So we have to go one step further, and the movement that we want to support is called regenerative farming. And with regenerative farming, the soil is hugely important. And the practices are designed to build healthy soil, maintain healthy soil. And that's where the real medicine comes from. That's where the real nutrient-dense food comes from. And it makes sense that it would, right? It makes sense that it would come from nature, from a really healthy ecosystem. And so one of the images that I think is really useful is that if you have a handful of this healthy soil, this regenerative farming soil, there will be more living entities in that handful of soil than there are people on the planet. That's how prolific the microbes are. And so as a local consumer, if we can get connected with these regenerative farmers, if we can, and that's what Harvest Oasis's mission is, as you mentioned up front, we're all about connecting local growers with local consumers. And that's the movement, the local movement. Let's spend our money locally. Let's spend our money on the things that make all of us well. And let's not be spending our money on the consolidators, those huge economic businesses that aren't in our local community for anything other than profit. They're only here to harvest our money, not any other reason. But when we can look each other in the eye and know that we're neighbors, now we're talking about a shared experience, right? Of really increasing the wellness of our communities. And we do that by buying the best local food we can. And in doing that, we're going to increase the supply and the demand, and we're going to reduce the price. So that's the mission that we are inviting everybody to, and that's the mission that we're joining with. And it's fairly robust, and it's fairly worldwide.
And how do consumers identify with this regenerative farming? Like where I'm getting to is with organics, there's a certification that the producer needs to obtain in order to put on a sticker to say that their produce is organically certified. In terms of this regeneration farming practice, how do consumers know that they're buying produce from them?
Well, that's a great question, and there are new certifications in the works, and there are a lot of nonprofits that are working hard in this area because labeling is so important, and it's under so much challenge right now. I think probably in the States in particular, our labeling is not as reliable and trustworthy as perhaps it is in parts of Europe, for instance. And that's understandable because the bigger players in the industrial food system, they would like to make as much money as possible. So reducing the regulation or the standards or whatever, they're going to be constantly trying to water down what organic really means. What I've heard recommended a lot is to go ahead and attend your local farmers markets and meet some of your growers and learn from them about what their practices are and see if you can't find some trustworthy local sources that way. I think that's always a good start. But the labeling has to improve, and it has to be trustworthy.
Yes, so start with the local farmers. That they will tell you the truth in terms of what they're doing around farming practices, and obviously support your health interests in doing so. Raul, you've been a bit quiet. You got any questions for Doug?
One quick question, Doug. Do you think with this food as medicine, do you think this can help us get out of this pandemic long term and maybe help prevent some other diseases going forward?
Yes, I do, and the benefits are great to the clean food movement, and when one of the important ones is it strengthens our immune system. And so what we're realizing with the current pandemic is that because we're compromised to some extent with our wellness, we're less resilient to exposure to the COVID virus. So a lot of doctors are really quite clear that the folks that are the most resilient are the ones with the best immune system health. And the way that we attain that is by taking care of our mates, really our micromates, as I mentioned. They need the right nutrition. One of the things that an industrial food system does is it creates a low fiber content in the foods. So processed foods process out a lot of the soluble fiber that the microbiome scientists that I mentioned earlier, the Sonnenbergs, they say that we now average only about 15 grams of fiber per day in the standard American diet. And our ancestors averaged between 100 and 150 grams a day. And the microbes, that's what they eat. That's what they turn into short chain fatty acids, and that's what they use to strengthen our gut health. And so when we don't eat enough of the food that they need, they have a backup food source. And this is what the Sonnenbergs teach. And we have an overabundance of microbes in the industrial microbiome, our guts, with this ability to eat a backup fuel source. So the primary fuel source has been depleted. They're only getting 15% of what we historically need to feed them. Their backup source is actually the mucus lining of our intestines. So the microbes, when they're faced with starvation, will begin to eat us. And that's where leaky gut comes from. That's where intestinal dysbiosis comes from. That's where a lot of our chronic illnesses come from. And so it's really important that we understand the responsibility that we have to take care of the microscopic life that we depend on. And when we do that, we become more resilient, and we can withstand the environment that we live in to a certain point. And that environment includes a lot of exposure to viruses and other microbes that maybe aren't beneficial to us, but that we're designed to handle. And so, again, I'd rather rely on nature and the resilience of nature, like we talked about, those trees that can sense a giraffe and they can send out a signal and they can sour the leaves so the giraffe move on. Okay, that same principle happens inside of us. That's a healthy immune system. It can recognize a threat, it can make adjustments, and we're fine. So I think it's super important to think of things in that way.
That's a great drawing on that analogy in terms of how nature works and how our gut works. So great question, Raul, and excellent response, Doug. I really appreciate you guys on the show today. It's been very insightful. Doug, is there any parting words you'd like to share with the listeners, and how can they best contact you?
Well, we can be found at harvestoasis.com. We are a local prepared meal food service serving our local community. We're a response to the issues that we've been discussing, and so you're welcome to reach out to me there. And what I really want to encourage everybody to do is just to think local. Think with about your own physiology, your own personal choices to be well, which I know, Anthony, you feature every broadcast. And so this commitment to yourself and your loved ones is where we all start. And then we do it to our communities, our workplaces, our environment, connecting with other like-minded folks around the world, as you are. This is where it all comes from. And when enough of us get alert to this, it causes kind of a quorum sensing, kind of a phase shift. It's hopeful. It's an opportunity for human beings to realize that we're much more alike than we are different. And that's the way forward. That's what I think is really important.
Absolutely, Doug. Out of adversity brings change, and change for the better. So thanks very much appreciate your time today and imparting your wisdom and knowledge about the connection with nature and the importance of microbes in our health. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Raul, for tuning in again and asking great questions. It's been a pleasure to have you on these episodes. So thanks, Raul. Thanks, Doug. And to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. This show is all about you, and certainly if there's any content that you want to know more about, please let me know, and I'll find an expert in that area and we'll cover that topic for you, because it's all about enhancing and enlightening your well-being. And until next time, stay well and tune in to more insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.